The city was a labyrinth of steel and glass, its streets winding like veins through the heart of chaos. I walked briskly, lost in my own thoughts, until I saw her, a shadow in the crowd. My doppelganger. She stood across the street, her eyes locked onto mine. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light, but she remained, a perfect mirror image of myself. I dismissed it as coincidence, a fluke of genetics. But then I saw her again, this time on the subway. She boarded the same car, her gaze never leaving me. I shifted to another car, my heart pounding. She followed, her footsteps echoing mine. Panic clawed at my throat. Who was she? Why was she haunting me? The train hurtled through tunnels, and I clung to the metal pole, stealing glances at her. Her expression was unreadable, her lips curved in a half-smile. I wondered if she knew what she was, a doppelganger from another dimension, drawn to me like a moth to a flame. And she was evil. I turned to the internet, desperate for answers. The search results were chilling. Doppelgangers, it seemed, were more than mere lookalikes. They were malevolent beings, twisted reflections with their own agendas. Mine was no exception. My paranoia grew. Every reflection became suspect. Was it her? Or just my imagination? I rearranged my apartment, hoping to break the connection. But the vase on the windowsill moved, its position shifted. I hadn't touched it. No one had. I lived alone, and yet I felt her presence. She was always there, lurking in the shadows. I stopped sleeping, my nights filled with nightmares of her cold eyes and twisted smile. She wanted something from me, something beyond my understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I heard keys jingling outside my door. My breath caught. I hadn't given the new locks to my landlord yet. It couldn't be him. It was her, the doppelganger. She was here. The handle turned, and the door creaked open. I stood frozen, my mind racing. What did she want? Revenge? My life? I had no answers, only fear. She stepped into the room, her eyes hungry, and I knew I was her prey. The room closed in on me, the walls pressing against my skin. I backed away, my legs trembling. She advanced, her footsteps silent. Her fingers brushed my cheek, icy and insistent. I choked on a scream, my voice trapped in my throat. And then she whispered, her voice a twisted echo of my own, "You can't escape fate, my other half." The darkness swallowed me whole, and I knew I was no longer alone. My evil doppelganger had found me, and there was no way out. The keys lay forgotten on the floor, the door wide open, and the city beyond beckoned with its secrets and shadows. But I was trapped, ensnared by my own reflection, and the abyss stared back.
The search began innocently enough, a mere blip on my social media radar. I was accustomed to the ebb and flow of followers, the occasional spike from a viral post, but this felt different. As the numbers climbed, I felt the ground shift beneath me, a sense of foreboding creeping into my thoughts. My once modest following exploded into an army of faceless avatars. Their profiles, blank, devoid of life, haunted my notifications, a constant reminder of their presence. Who were they? Why had they chosen me? These questions gnawed at me, fueling a growing unease. I scrolled through their accounts, desperate for clues. No posts, no personal information. Just a void, an unsettling emptiness that gnawed at my sanity. Their usernames read like cryptic messages at Whispering Shadows, at Veiled Truths, at Silent Witness. And they followed me with an unwavering determination, as if bound by some unseen pact. The more I delved into their profiles, the more I felt like I was staring into an abyss, an endless void reflecting my own fears back at me. The messages started subtly, a like here, a comment there. but soon they grew bolder. My inbox flooded with direct messages, each more cryptic than the last. "We see you," one read. "Your secrets are ours," whispered another. I laughed it off initially, convincing myself it was just trolls playing a prank. But the laughter died in my throat as the messages became more personal, more invasive. They knew things about me, things I'd never shared online. It was as if they had a window into my soul. Sleep became a distant memory. My nights were plagued by nightmares, vivid and horrifying. Faceless figures with outstretched arms, reaching for me, pulling me into darkness. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of their silent screams still ringing in my ears. My friends noticed the change in me, but what could I tell them? That I was being haunted by my followers? They'd think I was losing my mind. Their messages arrived at odd hours, insidious whispers that slithered through my consciousness. "We know your secrets," they taunted. How could they? I'd kept my past hidden, buried beneath layers of curated content. Yet they peeled back those layers, exposing my vulnerabilities. My childhood fears, my broken relationships, my guilt, the faceless followers reveled in my discomfort. I tried to block them, mute their voices, but they persisted. Their words echoed in my dreams, blending with the nightmarish images that plagued my mind. Figures with elongated limbs, featureless faces, and eyes that bore into my soul. I wondered if I was losing my grip on reality. Perhaps I'd stumbled upon a digital cult, a malevolent force that thrived on fear. One night, the messages took a darker turn. They weren't just cryptic anymore, they were commands. "Look outside your window," one message demanded. Trembling, I approached the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The street was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next message sent chills down my spine, a photo of me standing at the window, taken from just outside my house. I shut the curtains, feeling the walls of my home closing in on me. Days turned into weeks, and my life unraveled. I barely ate, barely slept. My work suffered, my relationships strained. The faceless followers were always there, lurking in the background, waiting for the moment to strike. I started to see their faces in crowds, faceless and void-like, always watching. I became paranoid, isolated, a prisoner in my own life. Every shadow held a threat, every silence a whisper. Desperation drove me to seek answers. I started researching online, diving into forums and chat rooms. I found others who had experienced similar hauntings, their lives similarly unraveled by these faceless entities. But no one had answers, only more questions. Who were these followers? What did they want? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of madness, the line between reality and nightmare blurring with each passing day. My investigation led me down a rabbit hole of encrypted forums and hidden servers. The cult called themselves the Blank Collective. Their manifesto spoke of ancient rituals, forbidden knowledge, and a hunger for power. They believed that anonymity granted them access to realms beyond our understanding. Social media was their conduit, a digital Ouija board connecting our world to theirs. I deciphered their coded messages, piecing together their dark purpose. They sought to manipulate reality, to bend it to their will. And I was their unwitting pawn. My influence, the likes, the shares, amplified their magic. But why? What grand design required my sacrifice? Each discovery led to more questions, each answer more horrifying than the last. The Blank Collective was not just a cult, it was a global network, a web of faceless followers connected by a shared desire for chaos and control. Their rituals were dark and twisted, involving sacrifices of both the physical and digital kind. They believed that by harnessing the power of social media, they could tap into an ancient force, a deity that thrived on fear and pain. I found evidence of others who had been targeted, their lives destroyed by the collective. Influencers who had risen to fame only to disappear without a trace. Their social media accounts left as eerie memorials, filled with cryptic messages and unsettling images. It was as if the collective had erased their existence, consuming their souls for their dark rituals. As I delved deeper, I began to see patterns, connections. The collective's influence was everywhere, their reach extending far beyond social media. They had infiltrated every aspect of my life, monitoring my every move. I felt like a puppet, my strings pulled by unseen hands. I had to find a way to stop them, to break free from their grasp. But how could I fight an enemy I couldn't see, couldn't touch? As I dug deeper, I uncovered their inner circle. The faceless followers gathered in secret, their chants resonating through the digital ether. And there, at the center, stood their leader, the puppet master orchestrating my torment. Their voice, once familiar, now dripped with malice. My closest friend, my confidant, had betrayed me. They revealed themselves, a void where a face should be, eyes like black holes devouring all light. You were chosen, they whispered. Your life, your fame, it was all part of the ritual. The blade descended, and I glimpsed the truth. My existence had been scripted, my suffering a necessary sacrifice. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. This was someone I had trusted, someone who had stood by my side through thick and thin. They had watched me rise, cheered me on, all the while plotting my downfall. Their betrayal was a wound that festered, a poison that seeped into my soul. I confronted them, desperate for answers, for a reason. But their eyes, those void-like eyes, offered no solace. In a moment of clarity, I realized the depth of their deception. Every success, every failure, had been orchestrated. I was a pawn in their twisted game, my life manipulated to serve their dark purpose. They had chosen me for my influence, my reach. I was the perfect vessel to amplify their power, to spread their darkness. My fame was a curse, a beacon that had drawn the collective to me. I was trapped, cornered in the digital realm. Their chants grew louder, a cacophony of voices that drowned out my thoughts. The void consumed me, pulling me into darkness. But even in the depths of despair, I vowed to fight. I would not let them win. I would not be their sacrifice. The cult's purpose unfolded, an ancient deity hungered for release. My pain, my fear, fueled its ascent. As the blade pierced my flesh, I glimpsed the cosmic tapestry, the threads connecting us all. The faceless followers chanted, their voices merging with the void. And in that moment, I understood, we were all pawns, dancing on the edge of oblivion. The final revelation was a truth too horrifying to comprehend. The collective sought to unleash an ancient force, a deity that thrived on suffering and fear. My life, my fame, had been a tool to amplify their power, to bring this deity into our world. I was a sacrifice, my pain the key to their dark ritual. But in my final moments, I saw beyond the veil. I glimpsed the connections that bound us all, the fragile threads of existence that held our reality together. The faceless followers were not just avatars, they were conduits, channels for the deity's power. Their anonymity was a mask, hiding their true nature. They were the harbingers of darkness, the bringers of chaos. And their hunger was insatiable. As the blade descended, I felt my soul being pulled into the void, my essence consumed by the collective. But even as I was consumed, I vowed to fight, to haunt them from beyond the veil. My legacy would linger, a warning etched into the digital fabric. Beware the followers without faces. They hunger for more than validation. They hunger for souls.
This might sound insane, but I need to share my story before I completely lose my mind. I'm Claire, and ever since I can remember, I've been captivated by the Phantom of the Opera. Visiting the Palais Garnier in Paris, the story's setting, has been my lifelong dream, and finally, this year, I made it happen. The tragic tale of Eric, the tortured genius lurking beneath the opera house, resonates deeply with me. As an aspiring opera singer, I've always felt a strange connection to him, understanding his longing and pain. The idea of performing on that grand stage, feeling the Phantom's presence guiding me, has fueled my imagination for years. When I arrived in Paris, the excitement was palpable. While sightseeing for the first few days, my thoughts were consumed by the Palais Garnier. On the third day, I couldn't wait any longer. The building was even more breathtaking than I'd imagined. As the tour guide spoke of its history and the legend of the phantom, most tourists seemed skeptical. Not me. I believed in the phantom. I needed to find him. I lingered behind the tour group, slipping away down a side corridor. The dimly lit halls exuded an air of mystery, filled with the scent of aged wood and dust. Ignoring the rules, I ventured deeper into the opera house, driven by a mix of fear and excitement. I had to find him. Descending a narrow spiral staircase to the lower levels, my heart pounded with every step. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. Following the faint sound of dripping water, I reached a decrepit wooden door, barely holding together. Pushing it open, I found myself in a dark, damp passageway. As I navigated the moldy corridors, shadows danced along the walls, and the stench of decay grew stronger. My flashlight cast eerie shadows, heightening my sense of unease. Turning a corner, I froze. There, at the end of the hall, stood a figure cloaked in darkness. My heart raced. Could it be him? Eric? I called out, my voice trembling in the silence. The figure remained still. Tentatively, I approached, noticing the mask covering half of his face, just like in the story. Despite my excitement, a primal fear gripped me. Something about him felt deeply unsettling. You shouldn't be here, he spoke, his voice a menacing whisper. I'm sorry, I stammered. I just wanted to meet you. I'm a singer, like Christine. He drew closer, his movements silent. A singer, you say? Yes, I whispered, barely audible. Sing for me, he commanded, his tone brooking no argument. I swallowed hard and began to sing. Choosing, think of me, I hoped to impress him. But as my voice echoed through the passageway, a suffocating pressure built in my chest. My vision blurred, struggling to finish the song. When I stopped, he stood before me. His grip on my arm was firm, his touch chilling. You have potential, he said, his voice softer now. But you must learn to let the music consume you. As he led me deeper into the darkness, pushing me to my limits over the following days, I noticed strange occurrences, a sense of being watched, whispered voices, and terrifying nightmares. Despite my mounting fear, I couldn't resist his influence. One night, he declared it was time for me to embrace my destiny. He pushed me to sing once more, and as the darkness enveloped me, I felt myself slipping away. When I looked into the mirror, horror gripped me. My reflection was distorted, a ghastly resemblance to Eric himself. Panic surged through me. This wasn't what I wanted. Attempting to flee, I found myself trapped in a nightmarish maze of tunnels, Eric's relentless pursuit driving me deeper into despair. I realized then that I was becoming a pawn in his twisted games, losing myself to the darkness. Now, as I write this, I feel Eric's influence tightening its grip. My plea for help is a final act of defiance, a warning to others not to fall prey to his seductive promises. He may have claimed me, but I refuse to let him win. If you ever feel the pull of darkness, remember my story. Don't let Eric's malevolent shadow consume you.
I've been carrying this burden for far too long, and it's time I let it out. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I need to confess what's been happening to me. This is the story of how I came to believe I am a werewolf and the horrifying twist that has shattered my understanding of reality. It all started about a year ago. I had just moved to a small, secluded town for a fresh start. The place was quaint, surrounded by dense woods, and had an eerie charm that drew me in. My new neighbors were friendly enough, but there was an undercurrent of something unspoken in their interactions with me. I chalked it up to small-town wariness towards newcomers. A month after moving in, strange things began to happen. It was subtle at first, scratches on my skin when I woke up, torn bed sheets, and an insatiable hunger that seemed to come and go with the phases of the moon. I shrugged it off as stress from the move and my new job, but deep down, I felt something was off. One night, during a full moon, I had the most vivid and terrifying dream. I was running through the woods, my senses heightened, the smell of the earth and the sounds of the night overwhelming me. I felt an incredible surge of power coursing through my veins, a primal instinct to hunt. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The dream felt so real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a nightmare. As the months went by, the dreams became more frequent and intense. Each full moon, I would dream of transforming into a beast, my body stretching and contorting in excruciating pain, fur sprouting from my skin. I would wake up exhausted, my muscles sore, and sometimes covered in dirt and leaves as if I had been outside. I began to suspect that these weren't just dreams. I started noticing other changes in myself. My senses were sharper. I could hear conversations from across the street, smell food cooking from houses blocks away. My reflexes were quicker, and my strength seemed to increase, especially during the nights of the full moon. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was all in my head, but the evidence was mounting. I decided to confide in my friend, Jason, who had moved to the town with me. We had known each other for years, and I trusted him more than anyone. When I told him about the dreams and the changes I was experiencing, he looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. "You need to see a doctor, man," he said, but I knew no doctor could help me. Desperate for answers, I began researching werewolves and lycanthropy. The more I read, the more I convinced myself that I was indeed a werewolf. The symptoms, the transformations, everything matched what I was experiencing. I read ancient texts and folklore, looking for a cure or a way to control the beast within me. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a full moon, and I decided to lock myself in my basement to prevent myself from harming anyone. I set up a camera to record what happened, hoping to finally get proof of my transformation. As the moon rose high in the sky, I felt the familiar surge of power and pain. My body convulsed, and I screamed as I felt my bones breaking and reshaping. When I woke up the next morning, I was lying on the cold basement floor, naked and covered in blood. The camera was smashed, and I had no memory of what had happened. I panicked, thinking I had hurt someone. I rushed upstairs, but everything seemed normal. It wasn't until I checked my phone that I saw the frantic messages from Jason. He was dead. The police said it was an animal attack. Jason's body was found in the woods, mauled beyond recognition. They suspected a bear or a wolf, but I knew the truth. I had killed my best friend. The guilt and horror were overwhelming. I couldn't bear to live with what I had done, but I didn't know how to stop it from happening again. I considered ending my life, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I moved to a remote cabin deep in the woods, isolating myself from the world. I hoped that by staying away from people, I could prevent any more deaths. But the full moon came, and the beast within me still emerged. I would wake up each month with blood on my hands, the remains of animals scattered around the cabin. I became a prisoner to my own curse, living in constant fear of the next transformation. I kept a journal, documenting each change, each hunt, hoping to find some pattern or clue that could help me understand and control the beast. Then, one night, as I was scouring the woods for any signs of my nightly activities, I stumbled upon an old, decrepit house. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. As I explored the house, I found a room filled with books and strange artifacts. One book, in particular, caught my eye. It was an ancient tome on werewolves, filled with detailed illustrations and descriptions. As I read through it, a sense of dread washed over me. The book described a ritual that could summon a doppelganger, a creature from another dimension that takes on the form of its host, feeding on their fears and emotions. The more I read, the more I realized that this wasn't a curse of lycanthropy. I wasn't transforming into a werewolf. I was being possessed by something far more sinister. The final pages of the book described how the doppelganger would eventually take over completely, leaving the host as a hollow shell. I felt a cold, creeping horror as I realized that my dreams and transformations were the work of this creature. It had been feeding on my belief in the curse, growing stronger with each full moon. I returned to my cabin, desperate to find a way to rid myself of this entity. I tried every ritual and incantation I could find, but nothing worked. The doppelganger was too powerful. It had become a part of me, entwined with my very essence. One night, as the full moon rose, I felt the familiar pain and transformation begin. But this time, it was different. The pain was more intense, more real. I screamed as my body contorted and shifted, but it wasn't fur that sprouted from my skin. It was darkness, a living shadow that enveloped me. I looked into the mirror and saw my reflection, twisted and grotesque. The doppelganger had taken over completely. I was no longer in control. It was using my body, my face, to continue its reign of terror. I don't know how much longer I have left. The doppelganger grows stronger with each passing day, and I fear that soon, I will be nothing more than a memory, a ghost trapped in my own mind. I can feel it, even now, watching me, waiting for the right moment to take over completely. This is my confession, my desperate plea for help. If anyone out there knows how to fight this creature, how to exorcise it from my body, please tell me. I can't live like this anymore, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. I fear that soon, it will use me to harm others, just as it did with Jason. Please, if you're reading this, be careful. The doppelganger is real, and it's out there. If you start experiencing strange dreams, if you feel like you're losing control, seek help immediately. Don't let it take over your life as it has mine. And if you find an old mirror, whatever you do, don't look into it. You never know who, or what, might be staring back at you. I've lost everything, my friend, my sanity, my life. The doppelganger is relentless, and it won't stop until it has consumed me entirely. I can feel it now, creeping through my veins, whispering in my mind, telling me to give in. But I won't. I will fight it until my last breath. This is my story, my warning, my cry for help. Please, don't let my fate become yours.
I've debated sharing this for months, agonizing over the decision. Part of me hopes that writing it down will somehow make it less real, but I know that's just wishful thinking. What I'm about to confess isn't just a secret. It's a nightmare that could spell the end of everything we know. This is the story of how a virus mutated in our lab and became something far more terrifying than any of us could have imagined. I've worked in a high-security research facility for the last 7 years. Our lab was at the forefront of virology, constantly pushing the boundaries of what we knew about viruses and how they could be used to combat diseases. The work was demanding, but the potential benefits were enormous. We were always aware of the risks, but I don't think any of us truly believed those risks would become reality. Everything started about 6 months ago. We were experimenting with a new virus strain that showed promise in targeting and destroying cancer cells. It was designed to be highly specific, attacking only the cancerous cells and leaving healthy ones untouched. The early results were incredibly promising, and there was a palpable sense of excitement in the lab. We were on the verge of something monumental. But then, something went wrong. It was a Friday evening, and most of the team had already left for the weekend. I was working late, running a final series of tests. That's when I noticed it. The virus samples in the petri dishes were changing. At first, the mutations were subtle, small changes in the structure of the virus, things that could easily be overlooked. But as I watched, the changes became more pronounced. The virus was evolving, adapting to its environment in ways we hadn't anticipated. I called my supervisor, Dr. Harris, who came down to the lab immediately. Together, we watched as the virus continued to mutate. It was happening so quickly, far faster than anything we'd ever seen before. We decided to contain the samples and run a full analysis on Monday. I left the lab that night with an uneasy feeling, but I tried to convince myself it was just the stress of the job. Monday morning, everything changed. When I arrived at the lab, it was in chaos. Security personnel were everywhere, and my colleagues were in a state of panic. The virus had continued to mutate over the weekend, breaching its containment. Several of the lab animals we used for testing were dead, their bodies displaying signs of rapid decomposition and necrosis. But the most horrifying part was that some of the animals, the ones we thought were dead, started moving again. I know how this sounds, like something out of a bad horror movie, but I swear it's true. The animals, their flesh rotting and eyes glazed over, were moving, attacking anything that got close. We were ordered to evacuate the lab and leave everything behind. The facility went into lockdown with armed guards and biohazard teams brought in to contain the outbreak. But deep down, I knew it was already too late. For days, we were kept in isolation, subjected to tests and decontamination procedures. The official story was that there had been a minor containment breach, but I knew the truth. The virus had mutated into something far more dangerous, something that turned its hosts into mindless, aggressive husks. It was a zombie virus, and it was out. The first signs that the virus had escaped the facility came about a week later. Reports started coming in from the nearby town. People falling ill with strange symptoms, displaying aggressive behavior, and then dying only to rise again. The government moved quickly, imposing a quarantine on the area and setting up a perimeter. But it wasn't enough. The virus was spreading, and there was no way to stop it. I was released from isolation and given strict instructions to stay home and avoid contact with anyone. But I couldn't just sit by and watch as everything fell apart. I needed to know what was happening, needed to see it for myself. So, against all advice, I went back to the lab. The place was a ghost town, deserted and eerily silent, but the signs of chaos were everywhere. Overturned equipment, broken glass, and bloodstains on the floor. I made my way to the containment area where we had kept the virus samples. The door was ajar, the lock broken. Inside, the room was a mess. The containment units had been breached, the samples gone. I found Dr. Harris's notes scattered on the floor. He had been trying to document the mutations, but his last entry was chilling. The virus is intelligent. It adapts. We're not dealing with a simple pathogen. This is something else. As I left the lab, I saw them. People wandering the halls, their eyes vacant, their skin pale and mottled. They moved slowly, aimlessly, until they noticed me. Then their movements changed, becoming purposeful, aggressive. I ran, barely making it out of the facility alive. That night, I watched from a distance as the military moved in, sealing off the area and setting up checkpoints. But it was clear that containment had failed. The virus was out and it was spreading. The next few weeks were a blur of chaos and fear. The news was filled with reports of outbreaks, cities going into lockdown, and the government struggling to maintain control. The virus spread quickly, turning people into mindless, violent creatures. It wasn't long before the term zombie was being used openly. The world was falling apart, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. I've been hiding ever since, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead of the infected. They're everywhere now, roaming the streets, attacking anyone they come across. The cities are war zones, the countryside no better. There's no safe place left, no sanctuary from the nightmare we've unleashed. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Every day is a struggle for survival. Every night a battle against the fear that I'll be next. I've seen friends and loved ones turned, watched as the virus stripped them of their humanity and turned them into monsters. The guilt is overwhelming, knowing that I was part of the team that created this horror, that I could have done something to stop it. I keep thinking back to those early days, to the moment I first noticed the mutations. If only I had acted sooner, been more cautious. But it's too late for regrets. The world has changed, and we're living in a nightmare of our own making. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, if there's anyone left to read it. But I needed to share my story, to confess my part in this tragedy. If you're out there, if you're still alive, take this as a warning. The virus is real and it's relentless. Stay safe, stay hidden, and whatever you do, don't let them get you. I fear that the worst is yet to come, and I don't know if we'll ever find a way to stop it. This is my confession, my last desperate plea for forgiveness. I helped create this monster, and now it's loose in the world. I can only hope that someday, somehow, we'll find a way to fight back. Until then, I'll keep running, keep hiding, and keep hoping that there's still a chance for humanity.
Please like and subscribe. And leave a comment. We will try to respond to all.